You know, in a courtroom, there's almost nothing more convincing than when a witness points at the defendant and says, "That's him. That's the person I saw." It just feels like solid gold truth, doesn't it? But what if that single, powerful moment, the thing our justice system so often hinges on, is actually built on sand? That's what we're digging into today, the eyewitness paradox. Okay, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and look at this chart. It's pretty shocking. It shows what caused wrongful convictions in the first couple hundred DNA exoneration cases in the US. And that giant bar on the left? Wow. Eyewitness misidentification was a factor in 77% of those cases. That's not just one of the causes, it is, by a long shot, the single biggest reason innocent people end up in prison. But here's where the paradox really kicks in. Even though it's so often wrong, juries find it incredibly persuasive. Check this out. A famous study back in 1974 by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus gave a mock jury some circumstantial evidence in a case. The conviction rate, a pretty low 18%. But then, they gave another jury the exact same evidence, but added one thing. A single eyewitness. The conviction rate skyrocketed to 72%. That's how much power we give to someone just saying, "I was there, I saw it happen." So this leads us to the big, central question, right? How can this one piece of evidence feel so certain, so right, and yet be so dangerously unreliable? The answer usually isn't that people are lying. Nope. The answer is buried deep in the weird, fascinating science of how our own brains work. First things first, we've got to bust a huge myth. Most of us, we tend to think of our memory like a video camera. We press record during an event, and then later we just hit playback to watch it again, perfectly preserved. But decades of research have shown us that's just not how it works. Not even close. Our memory is way more fragile and, honestly, a lot more creative than we think. See, memory isn't just one thing. It's a whole process. You have to notice something, then your brain has to encode it, store it, and finally, you have to be able to retrieve it. And here's the crucial part. An error can sneak in at any one of those steps. This means your memory isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every single time you recall an event, you're actually rebuilding it, and you might just use a few faulty parts each time. Psychologists basically sort all these potential errors into two big buckets. On one side, you've got estimator variables. These are things that the justice system just can't control. Stuff about the crime itself, like how dark it was, how stressed out the witness was. And on the other side, you have system variables. Now, these are the factors the justice system can and absolutely should control, like how the police ask questions or how they build a lineup. Let's talk about a classic estimator variable, the weapon focus effect. It's exactly what it sounds like. If someone pulls a gun on you, your brain, trying to keep you alive, does something very smart. It zooms in on the threat. You'll probably remember every little detail of that gun. But because all your attention is on that weapon, you're not encoding other critical details, like the attacker's face or what they were wearing. Your memory of the person becomes a blur. Okay, now let's switch over to a system variable that is honestly kind of scary, the misinformation effect. This is where something you hear after an event doesn't just add to your memory. It can get in there and actually rewrite it, changing what you swear you saw with your own two eyes. This is the perfect example from that Loftus study. She had people watch a film of a car accident. Afterwards, she asked them about how fast were the cars going when they blank into each other. The only thing she changed was that one verb. The results were incredible. When the word was contacted, people estimated the speed around 31 miles per hour. But when the word was smashed, the average estimate jumped to almost 41. One single word. It literally changed how fast they remembered the cars going. But wait, it gets even wilder. In a different experiment, people watched a car drive past a stop sign. Later, some of them were asked a question that subtly, sneakily mentioned a yield sign. So, when they were shown two photos and asked which one they actually saw, a whopping 59% of the people who heard that little piece of misinformation confidently pointed to the picture with the yield sign, a sign that was never even there. Their memory was completely overwritten. So if a single word in a researcher's question can do that, just imagine what can happen during a high-stakes police investigation. You have to start thinking of a witness's memory as a crime scene. And just like any crime scene, it can get contaminated if you don't follow the right procedures. Take these questions, which are real quotes from the interrogation of Brendan Dassey. He was a teenager with learning difficulties. Instead of asking open-ended questions like, "What did you see?" they fed him details. "Something happened in the garage, didn't it? Who shot her in the head?" These weren't his memories. They were the investigator's theories. And after hours of this, they became his story. leading to a false confession. And it's not just questioning. Police lineups are another huge potential source of contamination. Now, this cartoon is obviously a bit of an exaggeration, but it makes a really important point. If the police suspect is the only one in the lineup who even remotely matches the witness's original description, say he's the only one with a beard, well, it's not a memory test anymore, is it? It's a multiple-choice question where the answer is already circled for you.
Even the simple act of how a lineup is shown makes a huge difference. The old-school way is a simultaneous lineup, where you see everybody at once. The problem is, this encourages you to make a relative judgment, to just pick the person who looks most like the guy you remember, compared to the others. But what if the real guy isn't there? The much better, scientifically backed method is a sequential lineup, showing photos one by one. This forces an absolute judgment. You compare each photo directly to your memory, not to the other photos. It's a small change that dramatically cuts down on false IDs.
Now, imagine a witness picks someone out of a lineup. They're maybe a little unsure. Then the officer administering the lineup says something like this. This is called post-identification feedback. It's so dangerous because while it doesn't change their initial pick, it completely inflates their confidence. So by the time they get to trial, that "I think it might be him" has morphed into "I'm 100% positive," all because of that one little bit of confirmation from an authority figure. Look, these aren't just abstract ideas from a psychology textbook. They have devastating, real-world consequences. This is Thomas Sofano. He spent 4 years in prison for a murder he had nothing to do with. And his conviction was based almost entirely on eyewitness testimony that was just full of the problems we've been talking about. Bad lineups, suggestive questioning, the whole shebang. He was eventually freed, but not before his life was completely torn apart.
Okay, so the story is pretty grim, I know, but it is not hopeless. The same science that shows us exactly how memory can be so fragile also points us directly to the solutions. We know how to build a better, fairer system.
A huge tool is something called the cognitive interview. Instead of just firing off a list of leading questions, it uses techniques based on how memory actually works. The officer will ask the witness to mentally put themselves back at the scene. What did it smell like? What did it sound like? They ask them to report every tiny detail, and even to tell the story backwards, which can unlock different memory pathways. It's all designed to get the most accurate information possible without polluting the memory.
In fact, the official inquiry in the Thomas Sofano's case created a really clear roadmap for reform. Simple stuff, really. Things like, always record lineup procedures, use sequential photo lineups, not simultaneous ones. Tell the witness up front that the real perpetrator might not be in the lineup, and make sure officers don't give any feedback to the witness. I mean, these aren't complicated ideas, right? They're just common sense fixes that can prevent tragedies.
So I think the big takeaway here is that our memories are not perfect recordings of the past. They're living, breathing reconstructions that can be shaped and even warped by everything from stress to a poorly phrased question. And while we now know the steps we can take to protect the system and the innocent, this whole paradox leaves us with a pretty deep question. If your own mind can be so easily tricked, can you, or can anyone on a jury, ever truly be 100% certain?